Good afternoon. I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to the ESCP Business School webinar on robots and AI in business today and in post-COVID-19 times. My name is Tania Fernandez and I'm the head of marketing and communication at the Madrid campus. I would like to present our speaker for today, Professor Dr. Héctor González Jiménez, incoming scientific director for the MSc in marketing and digital media. Hello, Héctor.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. Well, besides being an academic, Héctor has worked on projects from small to medium-sized businesses, as well as large international companies such as Pepsi or Ford. He's interested in interdisciplinary research that addresses phenomena on the self and consumption, as well as human-robot interactions. Please post all of your questions in the question window. Professor González will be happy to answer all of them at the end of the webinar. We encourage you to participate so that you can get the most out of this webinar. Thank you and enjoy everything. Gracias, Héctor.
Okay, so we're good to go. Let me just open the presentation. Okay, we're good, Tanya? Everybody sees it?
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. So welcome again. Thank you for the nice introduction, and I'm really pleased to see so many attendees. Thank you for making time out of your busy schedule, and I'll try my best to make an interesting and insightful session for you so you get the most out of it. As mentioned, I'm going to go through the slides and discuss some of the key points regarding to this topic, and then towards the end, we're going to dedicate a little bit of time to address some of the questions you might have. So let's go through the journey, I guess, of robots and AI in business. So just to give you a brief overview of what I'm going to be addressing today. So initially, I just want to start with a brief overview of the robotics and AI market, just to show you the relevance it has and the impact it will have on the marketplace in the near future. Then I will go slightly deeper into what I mean actually with robots, in this case, social robots, as well as artificial intelligence. After that, I'm going to focus on some of the key sectors which are being impacted already and will be impacted more strongly in the near future. And then, because of everything we're living now through as a global community, I'm going to give you some examples also of how robots and AI are being applied in the context of COVID-19. And as mentioned, towards the end, then we're going to have some time, hopefully still, for a few questions. So let's just delve into it. So when I start this presentation, I always like to use these pictures to put you into a certain frame of mind, because going through this topic, I think we have to open a little bit our mind, our horizons, and be creative and open to look towards the future, not just looking at what is happening now. And as you can see on those slides, I call it science fiction or science. And you see I have a picture there of a smartphone, which probably most of you have in the pocket or on your table right now, an airplane, which I assume most of us have been on an airplane, and the moon landing. That has been restricted to just a few people. Nevertheless, the thought experiment I want to take you through is, now imagine time and place is changing. If we're looking at these things now, probably we would all agree it's science. These are things that are happening, which are we dealing with on a daily basis to a certain degree, irrespective of the moon landing. But now think back. If you would have shown somebody a smartphone 30, 40 years ago, they would probably have said that's science fiction, just like some of the movies we're looking at these days. Same thing for the plane or the moon landing. If you just go back enough time, you would show or tell somebody about a metal thing which is flying through the sky, transporting people really quickly across the globe. They would have said that's science fiction, it's not reality. But over the course of history, we've seen that these things which are considered science fiction, they have turned into hard and pure science, so they have become reality. And I want you to keep that in mind when I talk about some of the points which I will be illustrating over the next few minutes on some of the slides that I will present. Some of the examples I'm presenting are already existing, you know, the now, the today, but think further. We're going to talk briefly about some points which might come in the future, but even if we don't address them, just for yourself, think about how these things might change. So don't restrict yourself to what you're seeing right now. Try to be open towards, you know, turning science fiction actually into science. So why the social robots market? Why am I interested in it, and why should we be interested in it? I mean, first of all, there are a vast majority of scholars which are arguing that it will have a vast impact on society as a whole. One of the points pertains to employment. So a lot of the jobs might be replaced by some of these automation devices. So that's more of a negative discourse, which we see sometimes in the press, but also thinking about opportunities in terms of business opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities. Boston Consulting Group has conducted some research to make some predictions, and they keep updating their predictions actually with time and elevating them. So the most recent one they had a few years ago, they were estimating that this social robots market might be worth 87 billion in 2025. So we're talking about just 5 years from now. And we're looking at it from commercial perspective as well as consumer perspectives. You are not just looking at social robots itself, but other type of robots which we might encounter at home. Some of you might have those vacuum cleaners which are running around by themselves, but also you have some robot applications already in commercial or hospitality settings. So nevertheless, when you see this type of impact, you realize, okay, there's a lot of money behind it. So obviously a lot of companies are going to also invest into this sector and try to capture some share of it. Before I go into further discussions, I want to start out the presentation just with a short video which can illustrate actually how advanced some of these applications already are. This video in itself is a hotel in China run by the company Alibaba, which is kind of the Chinese version of Amazon. So let's just click on the link. It's slightly over 2 minutes, and I think it will again give you some impression of what is already possible in terms of integrating robots into the marketplace.
Welcome to Alibaba's Flyzoo Hotel, the hotel of the future. Located in Hangzhou, China, the Flyzoo Hotel project was led by Alibaba's online travel platform, Flyzoo. The hotel brings together technology and hospitality to find innovations that can empower the industry in the digital era. It all starts with the Flyzoo mobile app. From here, I can book my stay, choose the floor I want, and even the direction that my room faces. And when I get to the hotel, check-in requires just a few simple steps at this kiosk. For Chinese travelers, it's even easier. They can check in via the app and go straight to their room. Flyzoo features a range of AI services to create a convenient and seamless experience for guests. For example, you can choose to use facial recognition rather than keys and key cards to access the hotel. That means everything from using the elevator to entering your room is as easy as smiling for the camera. The hotel uses the picture I took at check-in to verify it's me. The Flyzoo Hotel has 290 rooms, each with a Tmall Genie smart assistant who helps me adjust the temperature, the lights, the curtains, and the TV, all with a simple voice command. Tmall Genie also functions as my 24/7 personal butler. Tmall Genie, 我要一瓶水. When that bottle of water arrives, it may not be delivered by your typical hotel employee. This is the future hotel, after all. Flyzoo has room service robots to do that work. I just input a passcode that was sent to me via text, and the water is mine. The robots also deliver towels and other items, and even the meals at the hotel's restaurants. If I feel like working out, the gym offers some fun digital experiences too. When it's time to check out, there are no lines and no hassle. I just pack and go. It was cool to see how Flyzoo's technology can make a hotel's services convenient and easy to use. And with hotel staff freed up from more routine tasks, they can focus on delivering a better experience to guests. I'll definitely be booking another stay soon.
So coming back to the presentation, I mean, you probably have your own opinion now about if you would like a hotel like that or if you would not enjoy it. There's definitely some pros and cons. I mean, when I speak with people about these type of hotels, or even if I think about my own personal opinion, I probably see the practicalities of it for a business person, which might enjoy this fast procedure without losing any time. Myself, I would also be very, very curious. I have never been at this hotel just to see it because I do research in this area. On the other hand, maybe for some private vacation, I would enjoy probably hotel with a more personal touch yet. But again, thinking about the future, these robots might also be able to offer that more personalized touch once they're developed in a more sophisticated manner. But nevertheless, it shows already some real world applications of how companies, are exploiting these new technologies to integrate them in something which was probably not too long ago almost 100% domain of humans. So delving into the next part, I mentioned the term social robot. We've all heard the term robot. Some of us might have heard the term social robot. So what are we talking about when we talk about a social robot? As the name implies, it's a robot which has capabilities to engage in some type of social interactions, just like a human being. This requires some use of sensors. In this case, the robot would be equipped with sensors. Often they would have some type of face, screen, maybe some body parts which allow them to interact. They have some voice functions. They can hear, they can see you, they might be able to project things. Everything basically which would be needed to engage in some type of social interaction with a human being or with other machines, be it other robots or technologies. And this is linked in this case also to artificial intelligence. An example I like to use generally is when we think about these robots, they represent the body, but the AI would be something like, in a human equivalent, the brain, something which is controlling these robots to a certain degree. Now, when we speak about AI, it depends who you're talking to or what books you read. There's a lot of different definitions, and the term is used very loosely in some cases. So I just want to share with you a broad perspective of what we might mean in this context, when we speak about AI. So you have heard probably in some articles, people talk about AI, about machine learning. Sometimes it's used interchangeably, but there is a general difference there. So when we speak about AI, often in the broader sense, we're talking about general AI. And general AI has to do with something which we're trying to replicate human level intelligence. Scientists have been working on that for a few decades now, but realistically, we have not reached that full general AI capability yet. The advantage of a general AI is that it's not just task specific. It would be able, just like a human being, to adjust to a lot of different scenarios, which might not be programmed ahead of time, but it can improvise, for instance. In contrast, when we talk about machine learning, often that could be linked to what many people will describe as more narrow AI. So the machine has been programmed and has capabilities to learn for a very specific task, therefore the term narrow. The problem or the challenge with narrow AI is if you take them out of their context, it will be quite difficult for a narrow AI or machine learning to perform, up to the level which might be expected. I can give you the examples. Some of these machines have been programmed to play chess or the Asian game of Go. I think 1 or 2 years ago, the AI, they called it AI, beat the best Go players in the world. So they're quite sophisticated in there. But now imagine if you would add another line to the chessboard or the Go board, you would change the whole structure of it. So narrow AI would have problems, adapting to these new challenges, versus a general AI would probably be able to take the knowledge they have and adapt it. So broadly speaking, we talk about artificial intelligence in a broader sense, and machine learning being an element out of it. So part within artificial intelligence. In the context of the discussion that we're having today, we talk about robots and AI. I also want to highlight there is some distinctions. When we speak about AI and robots, we talk about embodied AI. As the name implies, there's a body associated with it. A three-dimensional element, the robot in this case, which is equipped by AI. As I mentioned before, it allows you to engage in some social interactions. On the other hand, some of us have already engaged probably also with virtual AI. So virtual AI you might find in computers, on your smartphone, more in 2 dimensions. There are, of course, some advantages to that as well. But in terms of social interactions, and because in my personal research and my work, I look more at those social psychological components of robot acceptance, I focus more on the issue of embodied AI, which pertains to an AI which would be in or within a robot. So most of the illustrations or the examples I will be giving you today deal with embodied AI, so therefore in a robot context. As I announced, I want to focus on some of the key sectors which are being already impacted and will most likely develop further in the next years or decades. Obviously, some of these robot and AI applications might also be applicable in other sectors, but these are some of the big sectors which have a very big economic and social impact and where we can already see some development. So it would be healthcare, it would be the educational sector, which addresses or applies directly to the area where I'm working in, then companionship, relationship-related sector, and then retail and hospitality. And I want to share some examples of why it's relevant, but also some empirical research which has already been conducted to show some of the benefits or the challenges of using robots and AI in these sectors. So in terms of healthcare, we know already, and it's been debated extensively in the press, that a lot of countries are dealing with the issue of having an aging society, aging population. As we know, healthcare requirements tend to increase as we age. So these people need additional, so we're talking about elderly care, we're just talking about general hospitals, medical facilities. And on the other hand, a lot of countries are facing a shortage of medical professionals, nursing staff, doctors, etc. So therefore, already companies are investing in developing these healthcare related applications or robots. Sometimes they're being used simply for the sake of physical tasks, having to lift the person out of bed, because obviously these can be quite challenging for the personnel which is trying to deal with these patients. In particular, if they're not able to move, it can be quite difficult to lift this person. So some robots are already being developed specifically for those tasks. But they're also being developed in other areas in terms of, entertaining, overcoming some loneliness of these patients, sometimes elderly people which might be still living at home, reminding them of taking the medicine, entertaining them, basically a contact point for these people. And some empirical research has already shown some positive effects of these robots being applied in these scenarios and, reducing loneliness of these patients, or also helping with stroke rehabilitation or dementia care. Overall, there have also been some studies which have tried to analyze the difference between maybe using a two-dimensional interface like a tablet, where these people are dealing with, versus a three-dimensional robot. And again, people seem to feel more comfortable with these three-dimensional entities in the healthcare sectors, perhaps because it's closer to a human in terms of their perception, so therefore they have a more enjoyable experience. They trust these machines in a higher manner than just interacting with the screen or tablet. So this is definitely one of those sectors, first of all, which encompasses a lot of money, a lot of market value, and where there is a vast need of getting some assistance from our robotic friends, I assume. The next sector which I want to highlight is the educational sector. Again, it's a very big industry, private, public, nevertheless, there's a lot of money being spent and invested into these sectors. And already we're seeing some integration of social robots, in particular in child education. So you have to imagine the scenario. How does a kid look at these robots? Most likely they will perceive these robots as a toy, which in a way can be an advantage in an educational setting, because not all kids like to go to school, but if they get a game-like or toy-like experience with this type of robot, they might not actually feel that they're learning something. It might be a more enjoyable experience for them. You have to imagine these robots can be programmed already with math exercises, language exercises. They can monitor and recognize these kids so they can track their progress. And again, there has been already some research that has been conducted and offered some initial evidence that there has been some positive effect on math development, on language skills for kids. And also the acceptance, in particular, I think kids with autism have responded very positively to these robots. And I think, again, it goes back to that gaming component. Another element is a little bit related to what many of us are doing nowadays of telecommuting, working from home. These robots have been applied in some scenarios also where, for example, kids had some type of medical condition where they couldn't go to school for a long time, let's say a year. This might also apply, of course, to the workplace. So a robot was put into the classroom and the kid would project through a camera from his home his face onto this robot's face. So therefore the kid could interact with the classmates and the teacher and participate in class activities, being at home, but at the same time having some type of physical presence through the robot in the classroom. So again, there might be some advantages and disadvantages. There's an investment needed, but these are some of the initial applications which we're already seeing, and it is believed that it's going to increase in terms of the investment that we're going to see in those sectors. The third one goes into companionship, and again, here it depends how far we want to take it. Companionship can be seen, as I mentioned, for example, in elderly care, people which are lonely, they might have a social robot at home in terms of getting some support, reminding them of doing things, of engaging in exercise, of taking the medicines. But also there have been reports of younger individuals, maybe even single individuals, which work in a very stressful environment. They're coming home and maybe instead of having a little pet, a dog or a cat, they want to have a social robot there. Now we might think, well, it's not a living organism. Nevertheless, people started building some type of connection to these machines after a while because that machine is there at home, it's greeting them, it's entertaining them. Then, as I mentioned, there might be that part which many people don't want to talk about it, but there might be even a market for more intimate encounters with these type of machines. And I don't want to judge anybody, but even if it's a sector which many people don't want to talk about, we all know it's a massive industry across the globe in terms of having more intimate encounters. So definitely companies are already investing also in developing these sex bots to a certain degree. And again, there might be some disadvantages and some of us might be shocked about it, but there's also advantages in terms of not transmitting any diseases. And again, providing people with some type of service, I guess, if you want to frame it like that. But I wanted to mention it at least because I think it's still a big sector which is going to generate a lot of revenue, even though some people might not be really behind it, but nevertheless, we know it is something. And here again, throughout history, we have seen that human beings have developed some type of attachment with, of course, humans, but also with other biological species like their pets. So there is evidence if these robots are able to interact to a certain degree, to show some type of interactions, mimic feelings, even though they don't have them, it's likely that humans will accept them more and more and integrate them as companions also into their daily life. And the final sector I would like to highlight today has to do with retail and hospitality. I mean, two sectors. And here again, we've seen the example in the initial video of the Alibaba Hotel, which goes into hospitality. I think before the Alibaba Hotel, there was the Henna Hotel in Tokyo, Japan. You see the second picture there where you see a T-Rex on the reception and some robot lady. Here again, this hotel was using these type of robots for multiple purposes. Still some human staff is required, but a lot of activities like check-in, check-out could be done. The porter of the luggage can be done by the robot, and the manager or the creator of this hotel has mentioned, first of all, it serves as an attention getter. So some people, would go to the hotel just to check it out, but also they're able to lower costs in terms of efficiency, which then translates also to lower costs to book a room in their hotel. So this is a sector. We've seen some robots already being applied also in restaurants as waiters. People can put their order into the tablet, which is perhaps carried by the robot, and then the robot will also deliver the food to the table. Again, it's not mainstream yet, but some applications are already in the marketplace. Other applications, which I've seen personally at airports, you can think about information booth, reception. Sometimes you will have robots. I think in Seoul, the Incheon airport, as well as Haneda airport in Tokyo, I've encountered some robot going around the halls and providing people with information about their gates, about their flight departure times. So again, more in the information providing service. And then even retail settings, you can imagine, I've seen some of the Pepper models, which is developed by SoftBank Robotics. Often they're being used as showstoppers to get people into the store, to catch their attention. Then also they have some initial functions where, again, they can provide you with some recommendations, provide you with some general information. But these robots already have capabilities which go beyond that. It's just not being applied that much yet because they're equipped with sensors, visual sensors, auditory sensors. They might be linked up to their database, to the internet. So you have to think about a scenario again, opening your mind, and the possibilities already there in terms of technology. You go into a store, perhaps you're a returning customer, but it's not like you're going there every week. The robot recognizes you through their sensors, could be auditory, sensory elements of your voice. Also, they're able to analyze most likely the mood you're in based on your facial expression, based on the tone of your voice. So now, once they recognize you, they can go back to your purchase history, just like it's happening on your computer, and they can track what type of products do you like, what type of colors do you like for your dress or for your jacket, and then initially make a customized recommendation for you. And those are some of the applications which I think we will see being implemented in the near future, because again, these capabilities are already there. They're injected in these type of robots and AI. So lots of possibilities, I think, in the marketplace, and I'm relatively confident that step by step we will see more and more of these robots being integrated. From my personal experience, I think East Asia is more advanced in this sector. You see the integration of these robots in more mainstream daily life settings, but I would believe also the European market, for instance, will be impacted at some point more greatly. And that leads us to the topic which we're living through right now, and that's why most of us are now also sitting at home and doing this through a video conference. So the coronavirus has changed the world, is changing the world, and again, I'm aware that robots and AI have positives and they have also negatives or challenges we're dealing with. Not everything is perfect about it. But the narrative we're getting often in the news, especially in the West, is about, they're going to get our jobs. It's more on a negative perspective versus I see sometimes a more positive narrative in East Asia. So I think the media has a big impact here too. That being said, what I wanted to highlight today was some actual applications of how robots and AI are being used nowadays to fight the coronavirus, to be our ally or our friend in this battle. So we know, according to the press, that a lot of things emerged in Wuhan, and so Wuhan has had a lot of examples of how they've used AI and robots to fight this coronavirus. And again, I want to share just a short video with you, which is going to take us to YouTube. So let's just take a look at the video, and then I'll take you through the rest of the slides. It's taking some time. So as you've seen in the video, one of the main challenges that we've been facing and which led to the lockdown has to do with social distancing. We are aware, we've learned that the virus is being transmitted quite easily. So a measure to reduce transmission is to reduce human contact. So I have actually some friends and some former students which are based in Wuhan, so they confirmed that some of these applications that we've seen in the video really took place. And the interesting part, as illustrated in the video, is by using these type of devices to deliver packages, medicines, food to households, you were reducing contact. People didn't have to go to the stores, didn't have to go to the pharmacies. At the same time, delivery personnel, people which are moving around from place to place, are not required as well because these type of vehicles are autonomous. So again, by using these type of automatic devices, it was a good opportunity to reduce the likelihood of infection between humans. So therefore, I think quite a creative and useful application of automation technology to help us in the battle against Corona. Other applications in the cities had been related to disinfecting. Again, you've seen probably images, and even in your country, of people going around disinfecting the streets. But again, they've also used some autonomous machines in terms of robots or mini tanks, which kind of are a type of robots, which were going through the street, similar to your vacuum cleaner, and trying to disinfect local areas in order to again reduce the propagation of the virus across the board. A key area where infection happened were, of course, hospitals, and a lot of people, got crowded into hospitals. So there's always a risk that you're going into a room, somebody has been there before, the virus has been left there, therefore you're containing the virus in that room and you get infected simply by touching a surface. So robots equipped with UV light, which has been shown to destroy the virus, have been used to go to disinfect facilities within hospitals. Interestingly, here is also the robot itself. The surface might actually carry the virus, and imagine the robot moves into another section of the hospital and carry the virus there. So to reduce that risk, these robots also have the capability of disinfecting themselves when they using their UV light. So therefore, being a clean device, which again doesn't spread the virus and assists us humans in this case, to try to fight the pandemic. Some places we have seen police robots being used in China. Again, I think to control the masses to a certain degree, to see how many people are getting around, but also to provide some type of information. And again, we can debate later, about the naming or the term control, if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. But nevertheless, these applications have been seen in recent months, in the fight against the pandemic. Also, not just in China, we found some interesting examples from Thailand. Hospitals there also have used these robots. As you can see in the picture, they call them the ninja robots. So basically fighting the battle for us. And here these robots have been used also, for instance, to communicate with patients. So doctors didn't have to go always into the room and expose themselves to an infected patient. They would communicate through the robot because there were some microphone and speaker functions. And these robots were even able to take maybe some basic measures, for instance, measure the patient's temperature, therefore controlling if they have a fever or not. Here I want to highlight, and it's something also which I mentioned in my recent article. These robots are useful, and in particular in a medical setting, they might help us with these things that I just mentioned in the last 2-3 minutes. Nevertheless, the human touch is still very important, in particular in a setting where somebody is ill. Imagine they're already anxious, they're sick, they're going through a difficult time. Simply exposing them to a robot without any preparation might even stress them even more because it's something unexpected. So in these cases, I think it's important that first of all, the doctors would first introduce the robot to a certain degree to the patients and let them know, look, from tomorrow, you're going to have a robot visiting you once a day or twice a day to take your temperature. So don't think about it. We are controlling it. We can communicate without it. But nevertheless, that human factor, that empathy, is still an important aspect. And there's a very interesting piece of research by Huang and Rust, which talks about the different intelligence which AI and robots might be able to capture, or already deal with. And in particular, humans still have a distinct advantage in the area of empathetic emotional intelligence. So therefore, those type of jobs which are related to that type of intelligence, I think, are where we have to put most effort in, because they're most likely not being replaced too soon. And I think it's a matter of collaborating with these machines and using synergies, make it a win-win in terms of using the benefits of this machine, how it can help humans, maybe to free them up from some more routine tasks so you can offer a better service for your customer. But at the same time, conserve also the areas where humans are still much more efficient and much better, in providing some type of service. Besides robots, there are some applications related to technology which we have seen in the fight of the coronavirus are some of these trackers which have been used in Hong Kong, these bands you see in the arm, so they could know if people were heading out, leaving their home, in particular if they were infected, or the QR codes which you see had a color-coded system. I spoke with my friends in China, so basically they were going through this process in the last month. Once they had the green QR code, it would be kind of free movement within their city, for instance. They would be able to go into shops, into stores, because in order to enter a shop or a restaurant, they would have to show actually the QR code that it's green, that they're free of the virus. The other codes would be linked, to different stages of quarantine. And it's something which is being debated even here in Spain now. And again, there are some pros and cons related to it and how it's going to be managed. But the issue is, imagine a scenario where you go into a restaurant and somebody afterwards is being detected that was at that restaurant which tested positive. So we would be able to go back and check who else was in that restaurant at the same time through their mobile phone application, and then send information to those people to make sure that they quarantine themselves just in case, because they might be infected, or they go into some type of testing. And again, there's some pros and cons here in terms of privacy rights, of course. There's ample debate, but nevertheless, these have been some additional applications of technology in the coronavirus pandemic. And that takes me to the end of the presentation as it is. And what I would like to do now to get your opinion is I would like to do a quick poll on some of these questions, because just to get a little bit of a feeling of our audience, to see what you think about these topics. And obviously they can be quite complex and we could debate about those, but nevertheless, let's give it a try and see what your opinion is. Very simple yes, no answers. You will be able to see it on the screen and select it. So I just spoke about the issue of your phones being possibly tracked, in the benefit potentially of, helping with maintaining or controlling the pandemic. But again, some people have privacy concerns of what is being done, with that information or with that tracking device, in order to control you maybe beyond the coronavirus. So let's share the poll. So I will give you a little bit of time. You should be seeing on your screen now the poll. Interesting, we're seeing some movement there. It's switching. I will release the results soon. So maybe 10 more seconds. So please take your vote. Okay, so I'll be closing the poll and I'll be sharing the results. So we have a majority, 64%, would not be happy with the government tracking your phone. And again, this would be a full presentation. We could have a long debate on this and to explain each other's views on this. And I'm sure you have some very interesting perspectives. And I think it is definitely a debate which is necessary and which will be conducted, I think, probably in the next month. And if it's not now, maybe for a future pandemic, because at some point, perhaps there will be another one. Okay, great. So we'll see 64 to 36%. I'll be hiding the results. Let me see. I have another question, which I would love to hear your opinion. I've shown you some examples of robots being used potentially as a doctor or as an assistant to a doctor in the hospital. Again, how sophisticated, still human touch is needed, as I highlighted. But I would like to launch a poll which basically would ask you, do you feel you would be okay with accepting treatment by a robot doctor, for certain things, obviously? Okay, last 5 seconds. Okay, let me share the results. So here we have a different perspective. So 63% would say yes, 37% no, quite interesting. So about almost 2/3 would be okay. Again, if we go into the details, I assume it would depend on what the doctor or the robot doctor would be doing. So you could break it down probably by task, and it might vary on the basis of that. But nevertheless, it's interesting to see that there is a certain level of confidence that the robot doctor might be doing certain things in a good enough manner, you know, which can be helpful to your health if you need it. Excellent. So let me hide this. And I have a final question, which again now requires you to think a little bit more towards the future. Considering these examples which I've mentioned now about the coronavirus and, you know, robots, technology, AI being used to help us to a certain degree to fight the coronavirus. So what do you think? Will the use of robots and AI during the pandemic push or speed up the acceptance of these machines in other sectors? Now they've been applied mainly in the healthcare sector, but do you think the sentiment is generally positive, yet it is a useful technology, or do you think no, probably it will not have a spillover effect onto other sectors? Okay, we'll get 5 more seconds. Excellent, so let me share the results. Wow, quite surprising. So almost uniformly, 98% think yes. So perhaps if you're looking for an area to invest in, perhaps the robots and AI market might be there. If we think it's going to spill over into other sectors, at least the audience that we have present today here is quite confident that it's going to have some spillover effect, which again is quite an interesting. I wasn't expecting such a high number, but that's why we're running these polls, just to get an initial idea. Excellent. So those were just some general questions which I wanted to use to activate a little bit the discussion in terms of what we have been looking at. And now give me a second, please. I'm going to try to open the question area. I've seen some of you have posted questions, and I'll have to take a look and select some of them. Give me a second so I can. Okay, let's see. We got a question here by Juliette. Do you think in the luxury sector, the all digital experience would be appreciated by customers? I'm not an expert in luxury marketing, but luckily I have some friends which do extensive research on that, and we had some initial debate on a topic like that. I don't have evidence, but I can give you a little bit my feeling or my hunch in this regard. I think the luxury sector in itself will probably be a little bit slower in terms of the digital acceptance or the digital experience. Digital will be an additional thing, but people still are going to appreciate, for instance, going into a brick or mortar store. You know, you can buy products online now in almost all industries or across sectors. You can buy, of course, luxury products online as well. But I think a lot of people still value, particularly for the luxury item, to go into a store to receive that personalized treatment. This is now a little bit different from just having robots and AI. So I would expect in the context of robots, for instance, that people still want to be, you know, supported or they want service provided by a human being if they go into one of those stores and want to spend 3,000-4,000 euros, for instance, for a handbag or something very exclusive. We're talking about hospitality, you know, also luxury 5-star hotels. I would expect that that human touch also will still hold on. So there might be some elements of enhancing the experience through digital means. And again, it's not my key area where I see consumers might be appreciative of it, but I think as a sector overall, I think the human touch will probably prevail a little bit longer, and the brick of mortar experience, you know, the real world experience rather than the digital experience. But it's a very interesting field of research, and I think some studies are already being conducted in that regard, you know, how that sector might respond to the overall digital area. So I hope I could answer it to a certain degree. Let me see, we have a few more questions here.
Héctor, before you answer the next question, could you maybe stop sharing your presentation? That way we can see you in a full screen.
Great. Yes.
Thank you.
How about now?
No, still
No,
there.
not okay.
Stop sharing
Right.
the
Well, give me a second. Yes, I have to stop sharing
Don't
here.
worry. Perfect. Now we see
We're
you.
good?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it's better to look at the presentation than my face, but anyway, so thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
Let me see. Okay, I have another question here from David. While the effects may be good from a business perspective, how are consumers persuaded to use the services? I could imagine most patients being skeptical. I assume David refers to, again, the acceptance of robots, accepting robots for treatment. An interesting point here is being persuaded. I think to a certain degree, sometimes consumers might not be asked. You will be in a hospital and the hospital might make the decision if they will send a robot to you. What might happen that the patient might not be too happy with it and might complain to the medical staff about it. In this case, either the medical staff educates the patients about the benefits potentially of using the robot, or that there's simply no other choice because there's not enough personnel, like in the case of the crisis now, where I think medical staff, people were understaffed basically, so any support they could get from a robot would be useful. The other way would be if they simply deny they don't want to be treated, if it's a possibility to get some human staff, that they would then replace, the robot and send back a human in order to provide the service. But my feeling would be that initially, probably they would just try. Or they would ask perhaps the patient, would you be okay, again, doing that introduction, which I think is important, not simply exposing the person. But think about other areas where you're already facing automation. Sometimes you might not be too happy about it, but you don't get too many choices. I don't know if you've been lately in a McDonald's. A lot of McDonald's now, you have to walk in, you have to go on a touch screen and place your order. You can just go to the counter to pick up your order. I've tried to go to the counter and pay and place my order there, and they've sent me back to the touch screen. So in this case, again, you're not actually getting the choice in some of these instances. So I think there's going to be a transition period here. And again, this has to deal with educating society and consumers that this wave of robots and AI is coming, but doing it in a manner, which it doesn't come as a shock. And I see this as a challenge and it is a problem. I see even my parents in this regard. They're older generation. They have not worked with technology in their professional life very much. So they're even facing difficulties now with banking. A lot of banks are closing. Everything is just ATMs or online banking. So it's a similar thing, but they're kind of being forced to it. So often there's no choice. So it's a matter of sometimes top-down approach, and we as customers, we might not always have a choice here, even in the medical setting. But if too many people oppose it, perhaps, it will slow down the integration of these robots. And it's important that people voice their concerns. But again, it's going to be an interesting balance. We have to find that mix of educating people to increase social acceptance, but at the same time, not being too pushy, that integration needs to be slower. I'm not too concerned about younger generations. If I look at kids nowadays, that's all they've seen. They look at a screen, everything is a touch screen for them. They're exposed to technology. You see 3-4-year-olds using smartphones quite well. So for them, I think it's going to be just, they take it for granted. It's part of normal life. But even myself, I'm somewhere in between, but then older generations often are facing more difficulties. So again, a mix between, I think, being pushed to use it and then sometimes having a choice to complain, which might change it, but not always. So hopefully, again, that gave you some point or some type of answer to your question. Let me move down to another question. Here's a question by Alexandra. What use is being made of robots in Spain to prevent infections? Has coronavirus definitely boosted the use of robots in society? I have not been out much since the lockdown, but I haven't been in a hospital, which I guess I'm lucky for it. But as far as I know, I have not seen evidence of these type of robots like we've seen in the examples from China being used in Spain in medical settings. There might be some hospitals which perhaps some of their reception, the check-in might be automated through tablets. Again, I haven't used it, but that might be a more basic application, but I have not seen robots in itself or those delivery robots, sharing, or bringing packages around. So far, I think everything is still covered by humans. And then the second part of your question was, has coronavirus definitely boosted the use of robots in society? I think we will have to see. At this stage, it has boosted it in those areas where we've seen these key examples, especially in the Asian market. But I think we will see if this has a spillover effect. If it's not going to be something which is going to change from today to tomorrow. I think the Chinese have used these robots already because they had them in place. It was not that they suddenly created them. They're just using them more in other sectors, and then they just realized, okay, it's a good chance now to use them to help fight the pandemic. So the infrastructure was there to a certain degree. In other countries, probably the infrastructure still needs to be developed. And again, integration is probably going to be progressively. But according to the poll, and I also believe so, I think there's going to be probably a slightly quicker push in that direction. But many people might not be too aware of these things. Again, all of you are interested in this topic, so we have a little bit of a bubble here of people who are more aware of this topic. But I could imagine that even though it's going to be not too fast, that there's going to be an increase in society of the use of these type of robots through the coronavirus. Okay, and then let me see. I think we got time for one or two more questions. Okay, here we have a question by Nishant. Let's see. Can robots work for professionals like lawyers or teachers? And I'm not 100% sure. I will try to address it from two perspectives, because one way the question could be understood is, can they work for lawyers or teachers, in this case as assistants, or will they replace work as lawyers or teachers? But I will try to answer both sides. So as assistants, I would definitely say yes. Robot and AI in this case for lawyers or teachers, I think already in certain places they're being used, because they can go through information through databases in a much more efficient manner than a human being. Think about in a law profession where people have to go through old cases to try to find information which they can use for the next case which they're working on. In the old days, or even nowadays still, you would probably send the intern or junior lawyer to find all that information. Now, if it's already digitalized, AI can screen much faster and try to find keywords, and find information to put things together. They're already able to write articles. Even a lot of the press is already using AI to write news articles, because the structure is often quite similar. So they're just integrating results. Imagine about the results of a football game. So the main structure is already set. Depending on who wins, the information is gotten off the internet directly, and then the article is customized, and similar for lawyers and teachers. So I think as assistants, definitely, and the examples I mentioned in terms of robots already being used in education, they're probably not independently being used, but they're serving as assistant. The teacher might be, for instance, with the kids in the classroom, and then put the kids into groups, and each group will have maybe a robot which will interact with them. Now, the second perspective on this question, will they able to replace lawyers and teachers? Probably we will have a little bit of time there. Again, the assisting function, probably yes. Fully replace might take some time because of that human touch, those capabilities. But if we look far into the future, probably I could see the law profession in particular being replaced quicker than teachers in this regard, simply by providing arguments, and then analyzing arguments, looking at logical ideas and trying to reach a conclusion. But it's tricky because we know it's not always an automatic objective experience. The human touch or some emotion need to be considered also in this decision making. So it depends how it's going to be structured. But again, the future will give us probably more insights on what's going to happen. So it's exciting to see how it's going to develop. Let me see, I might have time for one more. Okay, some interesting questions. Okay, this is a quick one, and then I go into another one. It's Onkareshar. What kind of AI or robotics do you use in ESCP campuses? Well, I can tell you that actually I'm an android. This is not Hector. Hector's sitting somewhere at the beach, and I'm a robot which has just conducted this webinar. So no, just joking. We don't have robots yet in reception, so still there's a human touch at our ESCP campuses. Again, technology is of course being used, but it's still quite humanized to a certain degree. And let me see one final one. Okay, this goes, I think, by Asima. Do we think that there are regulations required because the information can easily be misused? My short answer would be definitely, and already we're looking at, this has to do very much with privacy concern, ethics of the use of data, the use of information, not just AI and tracking devices, also think about these robots. As I mentioned, they have sensors, they can capture your image with their camera, they can capture your sound, just similar to your phone to a certain degree. So what happens with this information, I think, needs to be regulated. There is, as far as I know, not too much AI regulation yet. People talk about it, but I would say it's very important that at a global level, that interdisciplinary teams come together which address this issue from a variety perspective to have some international bodies which will regulate this, because we expect that AI and robots will have a vast impact on our future. So I think regulation there is very important, just like you see like the WHO now for medical reasons. So I think there have to be regulations at a global level, and then I think there's also been at the local level from bottom up. I think there needs to be a lot of work being done in order to educate people, in order to make sure that information is not being misused. I believe there's already a lot of good research projects going on, some even in the European Union. In general, in terms of privacy rights, there was a new privacy act which got pushed through in the last couple of years. Every time you go online now, you have to accept always that they can use your cookies. So that is related to it. But overall, I think the need to have a more sophisticated and encompassing view on robots and AI in terms of ethics and what we're going to do with this information, I think is definitely there. So it's an important field, and I think it's something we cannot neglect, and we should not be waiting until problems start happening. So I think it's something which we have to make sure that we get it as right as possible, which is tricky because it's difficult to predict the scenarios, how AI is going to fully develop in the next decades. But I think we need to anticipate, work with different scenarios, and then based on those scenarios, develop regulations that can deal with these issues. And that being said, so I see we're at the end of the time of the webinar. So sorry I couldn't answer all the questions, but I hope I could address some issues which you found of interest. I also hope that you found the presentation overall of interest. And I think it's an important topic which I would all encourage you to debate within your teams, within your networks. And I think the more awareness there is about this topic, I think the better we can prepare ourselves and society and people around us to deal with the challenges. Because I think these things are coming. It's going to be difficult to hold them back. The trend is definitely going in that direction. So I think raising this discourse, even though some ideas might sometimes be very futuristic and even crazy to a certain degree, I think is important in order to prepare us and to deal with these things. So with that being said, thanks again for all your time, and I really appreciate you attending this webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Hector, and thank you everyone for being part of this event. And we hope to see you in future webinars at ESCP Europe Business School.